But hopefully I've got a great, lovely panel today. A real difference when I was asking, can you come and lead a panel about resilience and sort of that shift in mindset? And we'll be working with people who, really good at that narrative. We've already mentioned about the importance of the narrative we tell ourselves. Something we've already mentioned this morning about our relationship with nutrition. That's come up a few times as well. And also that body and mind connection. I know that came up there in terms of that, what's happening in that neurologically, which always fascinates me. So building resilience. Well, resilience means different things to different people. People often think of resilience as bouncing back, which it is. We often, when we're working with our clients, resilience is about what takes us. Do we know what takes us from pressure to stress? We're always going up and down this sort of spectrum between pressure or coping, pressure, stress. Sometimes we're in overwhelm and maybe we'll hit burnout. But what takes us up and down that scale? What are we doing to pause? That session this morning was perfect. What are we doing to stop, pause, being unapologetically selfish? I think you said there, Emma. What are we doing? What are our coping strategies? How are we rebalancing? And it's different for everybody. So today, we're going to be listening to some different options, different coping strategies that you can think of. If you are a sports fan, you may know of David Brailsford. David Brailsford worked with the British cycling team and now on to the British rowing team. And he talks about the 1%. What can we do? 1% all the time. So listen today. You've had some brilliant guests already thinking about what can you do when you walk out of the door today? What can you do? Little steps that can just help you understand what takes you from pressure to stress and then how to rebalance. Now, I could introduce this lovely panel myself, but I'm going to ask them to do that for us. And I've cheated. I have given them a little bit of a criteria because we have got lunch waiting. So, Anna, I'm going to come with you to you first.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. My name is Anna Strozek, and I'm a psychonutritionist, which is basically a bridge between psychology and nutrition. And I specialize in working with women who struggle with emotional eating and binge eating. And I take them on a journey to build a healthy relationship with food and find peace with their bodies.
Thank you, Anna. Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Courtney-Brown from Total Body Health, which is a holistic health clinic. And we have clients who are mainly women between the ages of 40 and 55. And our aim is to get them healthy and keep them healthy without medicine and without invasive surgery.
And I can't wait for you to share your story in a moment. Lalith.
Hi everyone, my name is Lalith Wijedoru. I'm from a consultancy called Behind Your Mask. It's an emotional well-being consultancy, which is for everyone, not just women. It's for men and women and even young people. And I focus on storytelling. I'm very interested in people's stories and using stories to develop yourself as an individual, to support your community and ultimately find joy and connection.
So an amazing panel. So Anna, I'd love to start with you. How important is our relationship to food? How is that connected with our own levels of resilience?
This is a great question because I think we don't realize, not all of us realize that our relationship with food is actually a mirror reflection of our relationship with ourselves. And we quite often don't pay too much attention to the fact that maybe if we are overeating or undereating, or we go to food to find comfort when we feel sad, or maybe we feel stressed, or maybe we feel tired or bored, we might be doing similar things in different areas of our life. And just to give you an example is coming from my own experience of 25 years of binge eating disorder, where most of that was actually secret eating. I realized 5 years ago when I started my journey that I was hiding with food. I was hiding when I was overeating, and I asked myself a question, okay, so where else in my life do I hide? And I've realized that I was hiding everywhere. I was wearing that mask of being a perfect employee, a perfect friend, perfect daughter, perfect partner, but deep inside, I had absolutely no idea who I was. And then when I was overeating, I also started paying attention, okay, what else do I do like that in my life? And I realized that I was overachieving, I was overworking, I was over-justifying myself every single time, I was over-apologizing. And that's why realizing that we eat every single day, so we can actually start noticing that if we start making any changes to that behavior, then we can start practicing it every single day. And when we can make changes to something what, in my particular case, and in the case of a lot of my clients, is the biggest nightmare in our life, when we can make it something what we understand, there is nothing we are not able to do. So that's very powerful.
So what did you do? What was your first step when you realised you were over fill in the gaps? What was your first step? What did you do to be able to sort of reduce that?
I told the truth. I actually told the truth to my psychonutritionist when I met her 5 years ago. And I realized that that was the first time when I actually revealed to someone that I think I'm not sure who I am. That was that conversation from this morning that, you know, we are standing on the platform, the trains are passing, and it's like, oh my goodness, what is happening? What am I looking for? And then very quickly I realized that I wasn't actually craving food. I was craving more attention. I was craving more self-care. And ultimately, I was actually craving more meaning in my life because I was doing everything from everyone else, but my needs were on the bottom of the fridge.
Something we recognise in a lot of the people that we work with, and you mentioned about being behind the mask, and I'm going to come straight. That's a perfect segue, Lalith, into what your company or the work you do is called Behind the Mask, and you've had a fascinating journey from being a paediatrician in emergency medicine to now supporting individuals and you know, a variety of people in telling a better story. Why that shift? And what impact has that given to those people you're working with?
I mean, my motivation for doing storytelling, it is about truth. And people think that when I set my company up after leaving the NHS, that the mask, your mask, was like the COVID mask. But actually, one of the purpose of masks protect. So yes, from a COVID point of view, it's protection of your staff and prevention of spreading of viruses. But masks conceal. And the reason why I use this as a metaphor is because we talk about concealing the truth. And what I'm very passionate about is actually speaking the uncomfortable truth. And as a pediatrician, so my journey actually started very early on in childhood because I'm a survivor of physical and emotional abuse as a child. And it was actually the silence of the people that I thought were supporting me that was the most deafening. And so my motivation to become a pediatrician, particularly in emergency department settings, is to identify and recognize those hidden uncomfortable truths. And so, but in doing this, in doing very emotionally challenging work in the National Health Service, I felt it was very important to protect the needs of staff, the emotional well-being of staff. I remember speaking to some ladies who were lawyers who were working in family law, that, you know, we are all human, that we are dealing with these difficult encounters in our professional lives, and we must think about how that wounds us in some way. And so when I use storytelling to support the emotional well-being of staff in the health service, I realized how powerful this was. And I thought it's not just the health service that needs this. Our work and our lives wound us inevitably in some way, and I want to use stories as a platform to identify and speak uncomfortable truths, because it's only when we acknowledge those uncomfortable truths that will start the way to healing.
And what would you say is your biggest change that's happened because of maybe a different internal narrative that you've been telling yourself? What's kind of happened along your journey?
And it's very similar to what Anna said. It's actually your start of your journey was acknowledging that truth. First of all, acknowledge that truth to yourself. And then once you acknowledge that truth to yourself, to share that truth in front of other people. Now that takes courage and bravery. And so for me, the shift in mindset for the adversities in my life and also the adversities in my career was to acknowledge the truth, process that truth to myself, and say it out loud. And so I would say to anybody who needs to have a shift in mindset, Acknowledgement is a really important part of moving forward. Many people say to me, but I don't want, it's in the past, it's not important, and we'll bury it. But actually, as a doctor who believes in the healing of wounds properly, it's important to expose wounds, it's important to clean wounds, acknowledge the wound is there, because only then will these wounds heal properly. And wounds will leave a scar. It's not saying that these wounds will never be there. The scar will be there, but a scar that we can live with rather than a wound that festers.
I love that. And actually, I was listening to a podcast recently. I don't know if people listen to Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and he had a great guest on I think it was this week, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. I think I've got that right. But he was talking about trauma, and he was talking about how the body holds it. So if you feel depressed, it's your body being depressed. If you feel, it's that trauma that it holds. So this brings us brilliantly, Tony, to yourself. You've created the Total Body Health with your lovely wife, who I met earlier, over and set up in Wimbledon. Your story is very different. There's a lot of sort of trauma healing that has kind of happened along the way. What was kind of the biggest changing point for you, and why did you set up Total Body Health in the first place?
I think probably the best way to explain this is if I pretend I'm on the shrink's couch and you are all the doctors, and I'm just going to tell you about myself. I was born from my parents who are of the Windrush generation, came over here in the 50s. I appeared at the wrong time. And so my father was at university in Nottingham. My mum was a student nurse in a bedsit. She would pile up a load of records on a radiogram and go and do a 12-hour shift. That was not sustainable. I was fine until the record stopped, then I'd scream. And the other inhabitants of the house reported her to social services, who said, you have to make some other arrangements or we're going to take him away. So I was fostered for the first 6 years of my life. When I went back to my birth parents, we didn't gel. I hated them, they hated me, we never really got on, and my father was very violent. At 15, I was put on antidepressants and kept on them for the next 45 years. Life, as it does, takes you up and down and around. I got married, had a child, and then realized that I'd married my father. What would Freud have to say about that? I got divorced, lost everything, and had to start again. I became a consultant for a while, on a nice day rate, earned a bit, but my accountant had not explained to me that there's a thing called IR35. And I was hammered. They took everything back. Start again. Christmas Eve 2011, all the contracts had dried up, all the letters piling up, repossessions, disconnections, court dates. The relationship I was in, the lady said, I didn't sign up for this, walked out the door. I had no money, no food in the fridge at all. What I did have, though, was a big stash of antidepressants and 3 bottles of wine. I took the lot. I woke up in a locked ward of a mental hospital, sectioned under the Mental Health Act. They doped me up some more, but then said that my depression was so intransigent, it needed something else. So they gave me 17 courses of electroconvulsive therapy. It clearly didn't work, because I'm still mad as a box of frogs. When I got out, I came across a Noma, who I'd known for a while before, sold my house, moved in with her, and we decided that we'd go into property. And we got a coach. The coach was a weird guy. He used to send me all these equations to work out, like sums. What's the ROI on this and on that? But he also said, I want you to read these books. And he introduced me to somebody called Dr. John DeMartini, who some of you may have heard of, and Joe Dispenza, and led me into metaphysics. And I thought, this is much more interesting than property. I'll stick with this. Then I had a load of other problems health-wise. My back went, sciatica, slip disc arthritis. So now I'm taking tramadol and gabapentin on top of all the antidepressants. I then had a prostate issue, some more pills on top of those. And I said, what happens when you mix these together? And they said, we don't know. That's pretty much how it is nowadays. There's something called polypharmacy, and most people over 60 take at least one pill a day. I then ended up collapsing on the floor, unable to wee, had to get taken down for some biopsies for the prostate, and eventually came across something called bioresonance, which is frequency healing. And from that, I began to see that there were other ways to deal with things. During COVID, that weird period when Boris used to stand there with his mates talking about R numbers and tears and all kinds of weird stuff, I got out of the shower one day and I thought, COVID, people just need oxygen. And so I said to Noma, let's go and get an oxygen tank. As you do. We went down, saw that this was really good for so many things, reducing inflammation. And you'll see over there that oxygen thing on the wall is what we do now, one of the things that we do. So that's a quick gallop through how the clinic came about and why I have a particular way of looking at things and do what I do with regard to health.
So you're now completely pill-free through oxygen, through other treatments. What's the biggest way that you support your clients?
Firstly, we listen. A lot of our clients have been to the doctors, they've been given 5 minutes, and they're writing a script before they can blink. We spend a lot of time asking people about their sleep, hydration, exercise, diet, stress level, and lifestyle. And then we put everything together from there on. We also look at what medication they're on, seeing what the side effects of those are. And that's another point, side effect. What is a side effect? It's actually another illness caused by the drug in the first place. It's a brilliant way of marketing medicines. So what we try and do is say, are you really going to have to take these forever? Or is there a way that we can look at this in another way?
Brilliant. Thank you, Lalith. And a great story just to kind of go, you don't have to be on those pills. What are the other things that you can be doing to pause, to stop, to be unapologetically selfish, to look after yourself so that you can put the oxygen mask literally on first? Lalith, coming back to you, listening to kind of Tony, how he supports his clients. You talked before about emotional wounds. How do you get to that root cause?
I think it's about reflect. So you talked about the power of slow and the power of pause. So I think it's really important that in our very fast-paced lives, we actually have very little time to pause and to reflect. And so what I like to do with storytelling is reflective storytelling. So if we think about what a story is, a personal narrative, it is just a series of events that happen to a central character that is you, and you have to think about how those events made you feel. So in a way, you've got to think, what happened? So what? What's the importance of this? But importantly, what now? What are you going to do next to it? So to answer your question, how do you get to the root cause of these emotional wounds? You have to take the time to pause, reflect, and really analyze what exactly happened, what were the emotions involved, and why do I feel this way about it? So I would encourage that reflection, pausing. Those are the ways to kind of address the root cause of emotional wounds.
And sometimes a lot of the behaviours we have are learned behaviours, aren't they? So we have these really bad habits. And if I come, Anna, to you, learned behaviours, eating disorders is often about learned behaviours, isn't it? So what's your approach with your clients to sort of start breaking those habits and unlearning it?
Mm-hmm. And thank you for saying that, because this is something what was definitely triggering me for a number of years. And if someone really struggles with eating, and what I mean by eating disorders or binge eating, it doesn't have to be actually qualified eating disorder. We quite often as society think that if someone struggles with eating or emotional eating, there would be some weight issues. And I do have to say that only 50% of my clients, roughly, struggle actually with weight. The reality is that a lot of binge eaters are people who don't have any problems with weight, but they can't get that voice of, I need to eat chocolate, I need to eat crisps, I need to eat whatever it is. This is the thing which is going through their minds all the time. And the reality is that the moment you realize that something what might have dominated your life is actually a learned behavior, on one hand, it's not about underestimating the power of that. It's about empowering us and realizing, okay, if something is a learned behavior, I can unlearn it. And something what I love to use in my practice, and my brand is called Feed Your Body, Not Your Mind. And what I mean by that name is basically when we start feeding our body, not feed our emotions, we can actually understand that there are lots of things which are driven by our mind. And working on our mindset and working on our subconscious mind is a big part of my work, because they are really very small things which we can realize, and they will make massive shifts in our everyday life. So just to give you some examples how our mind works, and I love to focus on subconscious mind because our body is the instrument of our subconscious mind. And I love to say sometimes that if there are lots of heavy emotions in our subconscious mind, lots of guilt, shame, anger, sadness, then quite often there is a lot of heaviness in our physical body. And we just don't realize that. And the power of our subconscious mind is, and this is something what we can literally just do to unlearn those behaviors, is start paying attention to the words we use. And we've been talking about the importance of words already. And to give you a great example, a lot of us might be walking around saying, I don't want to eat chocolate, I don't want to eat chocolate. Or you can take it to another area as well. I don't want to be mean, I don't want to say this, I don't want to do this, that. One of very interesting thing and interesting powers of our mind is the fact that it doesn't work in words. It works in images. And just to show you that, when I say, imagine the door of your fridge, each one of you straight away has the image of the door of your fridge. At the same time, the same mind can't understand the concept of no. So every single time when you say that you don't want to do something, you need to imagine that thing first in order to imagine how not to do it. And I will give you an example. If I say to you, don't think about pink elephant, what are you thinking about now? It's almost straight away, that pink elephant is in your head. So no wonder that it doesn't matter how much motivation, how much strong will and how much willpower you put. If you keep walking around saying, during the whole day, saying, I don't want to eat chocolate, I don't want to eat chocolate, I don't want to eat chocolate, by the end of the day, you are a Charlie in a chocolate factory, and the only thing you want to do is eat that chocolate. And it might sound simple, but this is how powerful it is. So sometimes instead of saying, I don't want to eat chocolate or I don't want to do a particular thing, we can just reframe it saying, I want to focus on having more vegetables. I want to focus on having more energy from my food. I want to focus to enjoy food much more, what the previous panel was talking about. Those are the small things when we can start unlearning particular behaviors.
You talk about the emotion that comes in the body when you're having those thoughts, and I think going back there, we were talking about how do we move ourselves from that sympathetic nervous system where we're kind of a bit charged to that relaxation of moving to that parasympathetic nervous system when we've got greater clarity. We've got more of a positive mindset. There's more of a curiosity there as well. So, by the Pilates or the yogas or the talking or just going out for drinks with your friends, that's sometimes how you can pull yourself into that sort of more positive thinking. With the positive thinking side of things, we talked before about that perception of thought, that power of perception. If I can go back to how has that positive thought process supported you in the latter parts of, since you've built the business? How does that play out?
I think it was Henry Ford that said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. That is the power of the mind. I'm a great fan of Marissa Peer, who some of you may have heard of, brilliant psychotherapist. And she wrote a book called Tell Yourself a Better Lie. Whatever you believe, you'll carry out. That will be translated all through to the cells in your body, to your mind, and you will or you will not do something. I mentioned earlier Dr. John DeMartini, another person who I admire greatly. I went on one of his courses once, and he said, "You, come out here, stand at the front." Me? Yes, you. He said, "Tell me someone who's pissed you off in your life." My ex-wife. Why? Oh, wine. She did this, and stop. I want you to think of 50 ways in which you benefited from that relationship. And I went, oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. He said, no, come on, 50. Okay, I know to draw boundaries now. I know myself better, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's it, Doc, enough. No, I want 50. I eventually got to 50, and he said, now how do you feel? I said, I suppose I should feel kind of grateful, really. And he said, good. Now we've got that out the way, I'll try and teach you something.
And that's interesting because we often talk about, every situation there's a gift. We may not understand what that gift is right in the moment because we're still a bit, we have more of a stressed saboteur type kind of way of thinking. But if we can bring ourselves back into that parasympathetic nervous system, we can start seeing the good. We can start noticing, and sometimes, some of you may be doing gratefulness diaries, always seeing the good. You see more. If you're looking at cars, you're going to see that car everywhere. It's the same thing. If you start being grateful, you start to see that everywhere. If you start telling positive narratives and giving yourself those positive stories, you'll start to feel that. So just as to close, I'd love to come to all three of you. If you could leave our lovely audience here with one thing to push them out, that 1% that, from your point of view, what would be the key sort of sound bite that you'd like to leave with? And Tony, I'll come to you first.
If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And when we're trying to make ourselves healthy, it's not just what we put in our mouths, it's also what we take in with our eyes and our ears. So be the gatekeeper. Don't let the bad stuff in your eyes or your ears either.
Amazing. Thanks, Tony. Anna?
We've been talking a lot about judgment, and I think something what will really help us is remembering about taking the labels. Because quite often, especially when it comes to food, we keep saying that something is right, something is wrong, something is good, something is bad, without realizing that every single time when we eat something what is bad, we feel bad for it. Every single time when we do something what is wrong, we feel wrong for it. Things just happen. The fact that we judge it this or that word is just our perception, and we can change that perception. And because there is a lot of shame and guilt, I would love to, because there were lots of quotes in the previous panels, I would love to give you one quote which helped me drastically change the view on shame and guilt in life. And you can apply it to food, you can apply it to everything. And the quote is, whatever happened, happened, and it couldn't have happened any other way. Why? Because it didn't. And that's enough, so yes.
Thanks, Anna. Lalith?
And so if we're here to talk about shifting mindset, I want to talk about how the stories that we tell ourselves can have a massive impact. So what I want to say is, if you want to shift, think about the times in your life when you have felt a victim. And then shift that mindset to imagine yourself as a hero or a heroine. And the difference between a victim mindset is that life happens to you, that you are powerless in this. But if you shift yourself to a hero/heroine mindset, you have a choice. And so my take-home message is, for every aspect and every narrative of your life, there was a choice. And so I think it's important that we pause and reflect on those choices and to see whether we can change behaviors for the future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lalith. And I think just saying, I want to go back to, I think it was Jules mentioned at the very beginning when we said, women, we're not very good at giving ourselves permission sometimes to put the oxygen mask on first. We're not very good at giving ourselves permission to spend money on ourselves. So this is now down to you. What's the 1% you're going to do? You can read lots of books. You can listen to lots of podcasts. You can get insights from those. But what are you going to do to change and build that resilience, whether it's financially, whether it's in terms of sexual confidence? What are you going to do to build that resilience? Are you going to go in a program? Are you going to start talking to people? it's that verbalization, I think, is what we've said. If you can start verbalizing it and becoming aware of it, but also getting other people's perspectives too, that's where you can grow, and that's where you can start building resilience, because you'll start to understand what takes you from pressure to stress, but also how do you rebalance.